Joy family. Welcome to the Joyful House today on this Sunday afternoon. It is so good to be here for Once Upon a Storybook as we continue our Anne of Green Gables series with the third book, Anne of the Island. Today we are going to be looking at chapters 25 and 26. Chapter 25 is Enter Prince Charming, and chapter 26 is Enter Christine. So I hope you'll sit back and relax for the next 10 to 30 minutes as we enjoy these next two chapters. All right, shall we? Chapter 25, Enter Prince Charming. I'm contrasting the claims of indoors and out, said Anne, looking from the window of Patty's Place to the distant pines of the park. I've an afternoon to spend in sweet doing nothing, Aunt Jimsy. Shall I spend it here where there is a cozy fire, a plateful of delicious russets, 3 purring and harmonious cats, and 2 impeccable china dogs with green noses? Or shall I go to the park, where there is the lure of gray woods and of gray water lapping on the harbor rocks? If I was as young as you, I'd decide in favor of the park, said Aunt Jamesina, tickling Joseph's yellow ear with a knitting needle. I thought you claimed to be as young as any of us, Auntie, teased Anne. Yes, in my soul, but I'll admit my legs aren't as young as yours. You go and get some fresh air, Anne. You look pale lately. I think I will go to the park, said Anne restlessly. I don't feel like tame domestic joys today. I want to feel alone and free and wild. The park will be empty, for everyone will be at the football match. Well, why didn't you go to it? Nobody asked me, sir, she said. At least nobody but that horrid little Dan Ranger. I wouldn't go anywhere with him, but rather than hurt his poor little tender feelings, I said I wasn't going to the game at all. I don't mind. I'm not in the mood for football today somehow. Will you go and get some fresh air, repeated Aunt Jamesina, but take your umbrella, for I believe it's going to rain. I've rheumatism in my leg. Only old people should have rheumatism, Auntie. Anybody is liable to rheumatism in her legs, Anne. It's only old people who should have rheumatism in their souls, though. Thank goodness I never have. When you get rheumatism in your soul, you might as well go and pick out your coffin. It was November, the month of crimson sunsets, parting birds, deep, sad hymns of the sea, and passionate wind songs in the pines. Anne roamed through the pineland alleys in the park, and as she let that great sweeping wind blow the fogs out of her soul, Anne was not wont to be troubled with soul fog, but somehow since her return to Redmond for this 3rd year, life had not mirrored her spirit back to her with its old perfect, sparkling clearness. Outwardly, existence at Patty's Place was the same pleasant round of work and study and recreation that it had always been. On Friday evenings, the big fire-lighted living room was crowded by callers and echoed to endless jest and laughter, while Aunt Jamesina smiled beamingly on them all. The Jonas of Phil's letters came often, running up from St. Columbia on the early train and departing on the late. He was a general favorite at Patty's Place, though Aunt Jamesina shook her head and opined that divinity students were not what they used to be. He's very nice, my dear, she told Phil, but ministers ought to be graver and more dignified. Can a man laugh and be a Christian still? Demanded Phil. Oh, men, yes, but I was speaking of ministers, my dear, said Aunt Jamesina rebukingly. And you shouldn't flirt so with Mr. Blake. You really shouldn't. I'm not flirting with him, protested Phil. Nobody believed her except Anne. The others thought she was amusing herself as usual and told her roundly that she was behaving very badly. Mr. Blake isn't of the Alec and Alonzo type, Phil, said Stella severely. He takes things seriously. You may break his heart. Do you really think I could? Asked Phil. I'd love to think so. Philippa Gordon, I never thought of you were utterly unfeeling. The idea of you saying you'd love to break a man's heart. I didn't say so, honey. Quote me correctly. I said I'd like to think I could break it. I would like to know I had the power to do it. I don't understand you, Phil. You are leading that man on deliberately, and you know you don't mean anything by it. I mean to make him ask me to marry him if I can, said Phil calmly. I give you up, said Stella hopelessly. Gilbert came occasionally on Friday evenings. He seemed always in good spirits and held his own in the jest and repertoire that flew about. He neither sought nor avoided Anne. When circumstances brought them in contact, he talked to her pleasantly and courteously, as to any newly made acquaintance. The old camaraderie was gone entirely. Anne felt it keenly, but she told herself she was very glad and thankful that Gilbert had got so completely over his disappointment in regard to her. She had been really afraid that April evening in the orchard that she had hurt him terribly and that the wound would be long in healing. Now she saw that she need not have worried. Men have died and the worms have eaten them, but not for love. Gilbert evidently was in no danger of immediate disillusion. He was enjoying life and he was full of ambition and zest. For him there was to be no wasting in despair because a woman was fair and cold. Anne, as she listened to the ceaseless badinage that went on between him and Phil, wondered if she had only imagined that look in his eyes when she had told him she could never care for him. They were not lacking those who would gladly have stepped into Gilbert's vacant place, but Anne snubbed them without fear and without reproach. If the real Prince Charming was never to come, she would none of a substitute, so she sternly told herself that gray day in the windy park. Suddenly the rain of Aunt Jemosina's prophecy came with a swish and a rush. Anne put up her umbrella and hurried down the slope. As she turned out on the harbor road, a savage gust of wind tore along it. Instantly her umbrella turned wrong side out. Anne clutched at it in despair, and then there came a voice close to her. "Pardon me, may I offer you the shelter of my umbrella?" Anne looked up, tall and handsome and distinguished looking, dark, melancholy, inscrutable eyes, melting, musical, sympathetic voice. Yes, the very hero of her dreams stood before her in the flesh. He could not have more closely resembled her ideal if he had been made to order. "Thank you," she said confusedly. "We'd better hurry over to that little pavilion on the point," suggested the unknown. "We can wait there until this shower is over. It is not likely to rain so heavily very long." The words were very commonplace, but oh, the tone and the smile which accompanied them! Anne felt her heart beating strangely. Together they scurried to the pavilion and sat breathlessly down under its friendly roof. Anne, laughing, held up her false umbrella. "It is when my umbrella turns inside out that I am convinced of the total depravity of inanimate things," she said gaily. The raindrops sparkled on her shining hair. It loosened ring curls around her neck and forehead. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes big and starry. Her companion looked down at her admiringly. She felt herself blushing under his gaze. Who could he be? Why, there was a bit of the Redmond white and scarlet pinned to his coat lapel. Yet she had thought she knew by sight at least all the Redmond students, except the freshmen. And this courtly youth surely was no freshman. "We are schoolmates, I see," he said, smiling at Anne's colors. "That ought to be sufficient introduction. My name is Royal Gardner, and you are the Miss Shirley who read the Tinson paper at the Philharmonica the other evening, aren't you?" "Yes, but I cannot place you at all," said Anne frankly. "Please, where do you belong?" "I feel as if I didn't belong anywhere yet. I put in my freshman and sophomore years at Redmond 2 years ago. I've been in Europe ever since. Now I've come back to finish my arts course." "This is my junior year, too," said Anne. "So we are classmates as well as college mates. I am reconciled to the loss of the years that the locust has eaten," said her companion, with a world of meaning in those wonderful eyes of his. The rain came steadily down for the best part of an hour, but the time seemed really very short. When the clouds parted and a burst of pale November sunshine fell athwart the harbor and the pines, Anne and her companion walked home together. By the time they had reached the gate of Patty's place, he had asked permission to call and had received it. Anne went in with cheeks of flame and her heart beating to her fingertips. Rusty, who climbed into her lap and tried to kiss her, found a very absent welcome. Anne, with her soul full of romantic thrills, had no attention to spare just then for a crop-eared pussycat. That evening a parcel was left at Patty's place for Miss Shirley. It was a box containing a dozen magnificent roses. Phil pounced impertinently on the card that fell from it, read the name and the poetical quotation written on the back. "Royal Gardener!" she exclaimed. "Why, Anne, I didn't know you were acquainted with Roy Gardner." "I met him in the park this afternoon in the rain," exclaimed Anne hurriedly. "My umbrella turned inside out, and he came to my rescue with his." "Oh," Phil peered curiously at Anne. "And is that exceedingly commonplace incident any reason why he should send us long-stem roses by the dozen with a very sentimental rhyme? Or why we should blush divinest rosy red when we look at his card? And thy face betrayeth thee." "Don't talk nonsense, Phil. Do you know Mr. Gardner?" "I've met his two sisters, and I know of him. So does everybody worthwhile in Kingsport. The Gardners are among the richest, bluest of blue noses. Roy is adorably handsome and clever. 2 years ago his mother's health failed and he had to leave college and go abroad with her. His father is dead. He must have been greatly disappointed to have to give up his class, but they say he was perfectly sweet about it. Fee, fi, fo, fum, Anne. I smell romance. Almost do I envy you, but not quite. After all, Roy Gardner isn't Jonas." "You goose," said Anne loftily. But she lay long awake that night, and nor did she wish for sleep. Her waking fancies were more alluring than any vision of dreamland. Had the real prince come at last? Recalling those glorious dark eyes which had gazed so deeply in her own, Anne was very strongly inclined to think he had. Chapter 26. Enter Christine. The girls at Patty's place were dressing for the reception where the juniors were giving for the seniors. In February, Anne surveyed herself in the mirror of the blue room with girlish satisfaction. She had a particularly pretty gown on. Originally, it had been only a simple little slip of cream silk with a chiffon overdress, but Phil had insisted on taking it home with her in the Christmas holidays and embroidering tiny rosebuds all over the chiffon. Phil's fingers were deft, and the result was a dress which was the envy of every Redmond girl. Even Allie Boone, whose frocks came from Paris, was wont to look with longing eyes on that rosebud concoction as Anne trailed up the main staircase at Redmond in it. Anne was trying the effect of a white orchid in her hair. Roy Gardner had sent her white orchids for the reception, and she knew no other Redmond girl would have them that night, when Phil came in with admiring gaze. "Anne, this is certainly your night for looking handsome. 9 nights out of 10 I can easily outshine you. The 10th, you blossom out suddenly into something that eclipses me altogether. How do you manage it?" "It's the dress, dear. Fine feathers." "'Tisn't. The last evening you flamed out into beauty you wore your old blue flannel shirtwaist that Miss Lynn made you. If Roy hadn't already lost head and heart about you, he certainly would tonight. But I don't like orchids on you, Anne. No, it isn't jealousy. Orchids just don't seem to belong to you. They're too exotic, too tropical, too insolent. Don't put them in your hair anyway." "Well, I won't. I admit I'm not fond of orchids myself. I don't think they're related to me. Roy doesn't often send them. He knows I like flowers I can live with. Orchids are only things you can visit with. Jonas sent me some dear pink rosebuds for the evening, but he isn't coming himself. He said he has to lead a prayer meeting in the slums. I don't believe he wanted to come, Anne. I'm horribly afraid that Jonas doesn't really care anything about me, and I'm trying to decide whether I'll pine away and die or go on and get my BA and be sensible and useful." "You couldn't possibly be sensible and useful, Phil, so you better pine away and die," said Anne cruelly. "Heartless Anne." "Silly Phil, you know quite well that Jonas loves you." But he won't tell me so, and I can't make him. He looks it, I'll admit. But speak to me only with thine eyes isn't a really reliable reason for embroidering doilies and hem-stitching tablecloths. I don't want to begin such work until I'm really engaged. It would be tempting fate. Mr. Blake is afraid to ask you to marry him, Phil. He is poor and can't offer you a home such as you've always had. You know that is the only reason he hasn't spoken long ago. I suppose so, agreed Phil dolefully. Well, brightening up, if he won't ask me to marry him, I'll ask him, that's all. So it's bound to come right. I won't worry. By the way, Gilbert Blythe is going to be about constantly with Christine Stewart. Did you know? Anne was trying to fasten a little gold chain about her throat. She suddenly found the clasp difficult to manage. What was the matter with it, or with her fingers? No, she said carelessly. Who is Christine Stewart? Ronald Stewart's sister. She's in Kingsport this winter studying music. I haven't seen her, but they say she's very pretty and that Gilbert is quite crazy over her. How angry I was when you refused Gilbert, Anne. But Roy Gardner was foredorned for you. I can see that now. You were right after all. Anne did not blush, as she usually did when the girls assumed that her eventual marriage to Roy Gardner was a settled thing. All at once she felt rather dull. Phil's chatter seemed trivial and the reception a bore. She boxed poor Rusty's ears. Get off that cushion instantly, you cat, you. Why don't you stay down where you belong? Anne picked up her orchids and went downstairs where Aunt Jamesina was presiding over a row of coats hung before the fire to warm. Roy Gardner was waiting for Anne and teasing the Sarah cat while he waited. The Sarah cat did not approve of him. She always turned her back on him. But everybody else at Patty's Place liked him very much. Aunt Jamesina, carried away by his unfailing and deferential courtesy and the pleading tones of his delightful voice, declared he was the nicest young man she ever knew, and that Anne was a very fortunate girl. Such remarks made Anne restive. Roy's wooing had certainly been as romantic as girlish hearts could desire. But she wished Aunt Jamesina and the girls would not take things so for granted. When Roy murmured a poetical compliment as he helped her on with her coat, she did not blush and thrill as usual, and he found her rather silent in their brief walk to Redmond. He thought she looked a little pale when she came out of the co-ed's dressing room. But as they entered the reception room, her color and sparkles suddenly returned to her. She turned to Roy with her gayest expression. He smiled back at her with what Phil called his deep, black, velvety smile. Yet she really did not see Roy at all. She was acutely conscious that Gilbert was standing under the palms just across the room, talking to a girl who must be Christine Stewart. She was very handsome in the stately style destined to become rather massive in middle life. A tall girl with large dark blue eyes, ivory outlines, and a gloss of darkness on her smooth hair. She looks just as I've always wanted to look, thought Anne miserably. Rose-leaf complexion, starry violet eyes, raven hair. Yes, she has them all. It's a wonder her name isn't Cordelia Fitzgerald into the bargain. But I don't believe her figure is as good as mine, and her nose certainly isn't. Anne felt a little comforted by this conclusion. Well, thank you for joining me for today's storybook adventure. I hope you enjoyed that. I look forward to being here next week as we continue. We are getting very close to the end of our third book here. Let's see. We are currently on chapter 26, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 more chapters to go. So give or take, that's about 2 more months. So since we are only doing 2 chapters a week, but as you can see, we're getting very, very close. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your Sunday afternoon, and I will see you next Sunday as we continue this wonderful storybook adventure. And until then, be joyful, stay crafty in your own way, make your own joyful creations, and be the joy in everything you do. Nugs and joy, my friends. Mwah. Thank you and God bless.